I am the CEO of Julius Baer in the UK. It's a great pleasure to welcome you. I am the advisory council sponsor for the Menopause workstream on the diversity project. So it is fantastic to have a panel here representing the insurance industry. I'm going to actually ask each of them to introduce themselves so that you can get to know them. Nina.
Okay, this is working. It is working.
It is.
Good morning all, I'm Nina Brown. I work for Aviva. I work in the UK health business, so I am particularly on point for propositions, so that's new product development. So this has been really helpful because, as was explained, we are on a journey, and so I think I've already taken some learnings to enhance our proposition, so I'll be taking some of this feedback straight back into the business. That's what I do.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Bridgewater and I work for Mercer, so I'm not an insurer, although it's part of my background, but I specialise in health insurance and I advise Julius Baer, and part of my role is also talking about new solutions in the workplace such as menopause. I'm also training to be a health coach and nutritional therapist, so I'm interested in that aspect as well.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nicola Green. I work for Bupa Health Clinics. My background is in insurance and provisions, so dealing with preventative primary care and then onto secondary care as well. So it's great that we can see how we can combine those two areas.
Morning, everyone. I'm Matt Cox. I work at AXA Health. I've got a split role, so I look after the hospital relationship team, so managing the relationships with all the secondary care providers, all those hospitals that your employees might well encounter if they go through their PMI scheme. And on the side of that, I also work on the medical policy and bespoke benefit design piece, particularly in the corporate sector, trying to develop, design and launch benefits that historically insurers haven't covered. Menopause is one, assisted conception, gender dysphoria support, etc.
Hi everyone, my name is Pippa Andrews. I work for Vitality Health. I've always been in the health and wellbeing sector from a corporate perspective, and I was one of the people that drove and worked with Peppy to bring the menopause support services into our product across all of our plans. It's embedded within everything, so that's me.
Helena mentioned at the beginning of this morning that there was a survey done of our industry, of the members of the Diversity Project earlier in the year. And the survey asked people about their own experiences of medical cover and insurance cover for the menopause. And of those survey, out of that survey came 39 respondees. The 39 respondees found that the majority, 63% of member firms had cover from the insurance industry for the menopause. Only a minority, 31%, provided non-medical intervention, alternative support for women going through the menopause. It surprised me, though, that the membership of the Diversity Project has 100 firms. So the fact that only 39 felt able to respond to the survey indicated we still have some way to go as an industry. But it is good that we have representatives from all of the main insurers joining us this morning. They are the main insurers that cover our industry members. I'm going to ask a question first to Emily, if I may. And that is, as we look at our own industry in the financial services one, we have been on a journey, and I don't think that a decade ago we would have had a morning like this. I know that also the insurance industry has been on a similar journey, and a journey which has changed a little bit of the mindset. What has been your experience of that journey for the insurers?
If I think back, so I started in the industry when I was very young, and yeah, back then there was a stigma around a lot of subjects that are now becoming more common in mental health. I remember having conversations with individuals 10, 15 years ago about the mental health cover, and the response would be, I'm not crazy, I don't need that. So luckily we've moved forward a lot on that subject. I had conversations with women who were desperate for menopause cover, and it was just a blanket no. It wasn't even a conversation of where they could get support. Just The insurance industry just was not a place for that. And actually, in terms of your industry, I think that's where a lot of the change has been driven from. So in my experience, it is the larger investment banks that have driven that change, the companies that have the big trusts that can design their benefits as they want. They're not limited to policy design within the insurance companies. And they're the ones that have driven the assisted fertility, the gender dysphoria, and now the menopause. And hopefully you'll agree, but I think the insurers then view that within a trust, see how that goes, and then they start to put that within standard policy for all the insurance policies. So we're, I think, at the beginning of the journey for menopause. I think it's great that there is something in place now for a diagnosis and a treatment plan, but there's still, I think, a long way to go. Like as we've discussed around education is so important. More holistical view of support. So there's the drugs, but there's a lot of research needed into even nutrition, the gut bacteria that will have an impact on hormones. And sadly, there just isn't enough research into women's bodies generally, let alone menopause. That's one for you.
Thank you, Emily. Emily mentioned the restrictions that can happen and whether insurance cover covers the menopause as standard cover. Nicola, if I can ask you, your experience at Bupa, how is the menopause covered? Is it a restriction or is it standard?
So we have, within the primary care space, so from a provisions point of view, we sell a specific menopause plan to corporates, to consumers. So it's a product that's available for everybody. And the driver behind that plan, it addresses all of the things that you talked about before, Carolyn, where you have 45 minutes with a doctor who has been specifically trained on women's health and menopause, so you are getting that expert advice. You then have follow-ups 3 months later to the lady at the front point there to check that everything's going well, along with, it's over a 12-month programme. So it's a fantastic programme that provides support right the way through a 12-month period with doctors, 24/7 nurses helpline, to ensure that everybody is fully supported clinically through that journey. Linking into the insurance side, when we have conversations with clients, we do look at the provisions as well as the insurance. And as you say, some of your trust schemes will add on benefits and different options available there. And I think where the difference currently is for me and with Bupa, we have complications of, or if you're suffering with your mental health, or if you have irregular bleeding, and there's some areas that you need looking into, that naturally drops straight into the insurance policies as standard. So from a policy perspective, that would be covered and you would get the care and support and treatment that you need during that time. Where the insurance policy doesn't, and this is where we need to look at how we build these into our products and services moving forwards, from an insurance point of view, would be the majority of menopause issues are and would be dealt with in a primary care setting. So therefore, it naturally sits in that area. However, we do know that more than 50% of ladies that are experiencing problems can't get into their GPs. They can't get the services from the NHS. So there is a gap there, which we have provided a solution for from a provisions point of view. But if you are insured, you don't necessarily need to go and see a gynecologist for menopause challenges that you have. So it's probably trying to combine further than we already do, the primary care into the secondary care, so you see the right medical professional for the treatment and support that you need.
Thank you. Matt, Helena mentioned earlier the Standard Chartered report that was done in 21 that showed that 1 in 10 women are going through the menopause at any one time. And that is a considerable amount of the workforce that is at any one point in time experiencing the menopause. Why historically has the insurance industry not treated this seriously and treated it as part of a standard cover?
So speaking specifically for AXA, but I imagine actually on behalf of all my colleagues here, insurance originally was set out to cover acute medical conditions, things that came up that could be diagnosed, treated fairly rapidly, and that you could be discharged from. Think your hip replacement, that sort of thing. We have then used that to essentially hide from some of these really big ticket items. I'm going to admit that for us as an insurer, understanding where would our liability start and end for some of these more challenging conditions that aren't traditionally seen as acute, was something we ran away from. But I'm really, really pleased that actually we've kind of approached this now and said, do you know what? We've been paying for menopause for years. And I think this is a real key learning. To the point that Carolyn made earlier, you might see a psychiatrist, you might see a gynecologist, an endocrinologist, a neurologist if you're having headaches. All of these things were coming through, not directly related to menopause. If you said menopause, we'd decline it. If you said many of those symptoms, and actually we followed it through, your GP didn't know who they were sending you to, you were confused, your practitioners were confused, we'd allow you to have some investigations and ultimately get some treatment, potentially the wrong treatment, but some treatment. So AXA recently has made that decision that although we've been offering it to corporates since January last year, we've been paying for a lot of this anyway. So from this October, we're actually making it standard now to cover menopause under all of our policies, so individual, SME and corporate. But in doing so, what we're really doing is trying to direct people to the right person, so the right treating clinician at the right time. Primary care is absolutely correct, but our primary care clinicians are those who have had dedicated training or are registered with the BMS, so the British Menopause Society. So they've had that additional training and ongoing training, which is absolutely key, not just ticking a box on an e-learning module 10 years ago. And if they cannot support you, then we can cover referral onto a BMS-registered specialist clinician, which might be a dedicated specialist GP, gynecologist or endocrinologist, to perhaps consider your case further.
Thank you. I think we may come back on some of those points a little bit later in the Q&A. But maybe, Nina, if you could explain what Aviva's approach is and whether it is a standard or an add-on for you.
No, I agree, and I absolutely agree with the points that you made as to where we started as a provision, which was very much about acute. And now we've started to say as an industry, let's not just keep ourselves in a confine of a space. Let's look at public healthcare and say, what are the pain points and what are the issues within that we need to resolve as an industry? Hence why, so we have developed, also in a primary care setting, via our digital GP service, you can access a symptom assessment tool, and then you can go on and have a consultation. So you can have up to 6 30-minute consultations with a menopause nurse. And if there's a requirement for a prescription or for a fit note or for a referral onto secondary care, that can all be enabled via that or through that service. So I think we are opening, or I think what we're challenging is the inconsistencies that you might see in a public care setting, and saying let's try and offer a scalable, low-cost solution, because then you can provide this for many, many people. And this isn't just about those people that are struggling. This is also about families, and we've seen really good take-up of those people that might be in a support network for those people that are struggling. So it's not just those people that are utilising our service that are in the midst of a menopause, it's also the people around them. And we're delighted, because that was absolutely our intention to say it's not just about that particular audience, it's about everybody else around it. I think you were speaking before about line managers and the importance that they play in this. Absolutely, and I'm sure there's going to be a question that comes about what people can do in the workplace, but it's really important that we enable that support. And again, as an industry, we're not just saying the audience is that person that is experiencing, we're saying what can we do that helps to support everybody that's part of that healthcare journey. And that's why we now provide guidance for line managers, but also for employees as to how they best respond to these challenges, recognising that not everybody in a workforce will have private medical insurance either. So let's look bigger and broader. Let's break down the constraints of what was the private medical insurance construct, and let's just say, what are the pain points? Oh, shouted that bit. What are the pain points, and how do we best respond to them?
Thank you. Pippa, the industry is focused on trying to attract and also retain females in the C-suite and at board level. What role do you think the private medical insurers can play in supporting that?
Well, I think providing menopause support cover through the private medical insurance, I think, is one of the key steps. But I think understanding all of the various phases that women go through in life, and I myself stumbled across PEPI and menopause support services when I found, even working at Vitality, I'd been in the the medical insurance and health insurance frame for my whole career. And yet when menopause struck, I still knew nothing about it. I still couldn't find any support. I looked to my employer, I looked online, we all do the Google thing. I tried my GP, I got short shrift. It was during COVID, so were my menopausal symptoms actually COVID? I didn't even think it was menopause, actually. I thought it was due to the lockdown. And so I think if I take myself as an example, I think women need to be understood and supported throughout their whole career. And I didn't even know, to your point, I didn't even know I was going through the menopause. I didn't even know I needed support. And when I looked for support, there really wasn't anything out there. I stumbled across PEPI. PEPI isn't available, which is a menopause support provider, an app, and it provides webinars and all the fabulous things that we now use. They weren't available for individuals. They're only available through organizations. So I was like, well, I'm a senior person in an organization. Let me see if we can get that for our staff. So that was the start of our journey, actually, with PEPI and menopause support services. I was able to take that to our board, and I was privileged in a position to do that. But when we looked at it, actually, as has been discussed here today, it's important that line managers know. It's important that men are supported, that men know about it from their wives, their mothers, etc. So when we were looking at the menopause support services that we wanted to provide, and one of the reasons I think it's been fairly recent is there just wasn't anything out there for private medical insurers to hang a benefit onto. What do we provide? Is it just prescriptions? Is it overlapping support? Is it GP services? So it needs to be everything. So one of the things we did was we made sure that our GP service, our virtual GP service, is fully trained, as you say. They know what provision is available both in the PMI, in the medical setting, but also in the menopause setting. And we made sure that PEPI were trained on what was also available in the private medical insurance. But more than that, it is about diet, it is about nutrition, it is about movement, it is about exercise, it is about mental health. And really, again, I think that's one of the things employers and indeed insurers need to take account of. It's not just prescriptions and HRT. It's not just diet. It's not just adjustments at work. It's all of the above. And it's not just one consultation. It's being able to chat to other people. It's being able to share stories. So I think if employers can share stories, they can get a senior female to share their story. That's really powerful. That's opening up the conversation. So I think it does feel, and there's been references made to it feels like the mental health situation 15, 20 years ago. We've got a lot of catching up to do. The first point is making the provision available, talking about it and opening up the discussion in all of our workplaces. And then I think women won't feel alienated. Women will feel that this is something normal and they're supported.
Thank you. I'm going to actually ask a question to anybody from the panel who would like to respond. It picked up on something that Matt said earlier about how cover has been perhaps provided in the past but not necessarily identified with the menopause. It may have been misdiagnosed. Clearly, the insurance industry has and continues to pay out for misdiagnosis. What role do you think the insurance industry can play in helping to educate the medical industry? We heard a little bit from Carolyn earlier, the need for that education. What role do you think you as an industry can play in that? Who would like to pick that up?
I mean, one of the things that we think is working with all of our providers and all of our specialists across all of our hospital groups to say that there's linkage between. So if you just go on the PEPI app and you get support, that's great. If you just come in clinically via the GP service, that's great. But there's got to be linkage between all of those services. And I think that's the one thing we've been working to achieve with all of our traditional, shall we say, providers, is making sure that they know what new provision is available, what they could be looking out for, and what they could be signposting into other support mechanisms that exist.
And just to build on that, I think as well from a clinician's point of view, with raising awareness and education, CPD events are absolutely key, and we hold lots of CPD events for all of our doctors and spreading out further to the consultants that we work with as well. I think that's essential because it's not something that has historically been done, so therefore we can raise awareness, we can signpost, we can make sure we're equipping our consultants and our doctors with the best knowledge they have to be able to ensure a correct diagnosis and treatment care pathway as well.
And I think just pick up on the other end of some of this clinician piece. Educating clinicians, making them be as effective as possible is one thing. Historically, where menopause care was difficult to access, there was a group of clinicians who essentially thought, let's monetize menopause. These regular blood tests every 3 months, 2 months, every 4 weeks, it's unnecessary. You shouldn't need blood tests. Actually, the nice guidance on how to diagnose menopause is quite straightforward. There is a place for some blood tests, particularly in the perimenopausal population, or those who are potentially 40 to 45 and displaying some symptoms of menopause. But this shouldn't be something that costs a lot of money, which is why we should all feel comfortable that if we can get it in the right setting, this is something we can afford to do, and you can't afford not to do. Ultimately, you need to get on board with this. And we just need to facilitate that kind of entrance route, stopping those over-treating or where there's negative variation in practice, pulling them back in and telling you the right people to utilise for your employees.
Sorry, if I can just add to that. In terms of overspend, if you're looking within your business, it's important to look beyond just the medical insurance, because you'll probably find if you look broader across your employee benefits, there are other solutions outside of the clinical diagnosis and treatment, but your income protection policies will likely provide some mental health support for an EAP. They're also taking a more invested interest into preventative treatment, whether that's nutrition, exercise. So what I'm really keen to do is create sort of a roundtable, a pathway proposition to help each individual employer look at all your employee benefits, piece it together so you can create a journey for your employee and also identify gaps where you're not supporting people correctly.
And just to build on that, Emily, it's absolutely a key point, because businesses have a budget. This is how much we've got to spend to support our people. And it's really important that actually unnecessary onward referrals into secondary care is very expensive. And actually, if that isn't needed and you can provide the right level of support in the primary care setting, again, to the right person, going to the right clinician, your budget will go further, and actually you can provide more services and support to your employees in the right areas. And actually your onward into secondary care, so from an insurance, consultants, inpatient stays, your spend there will reduce, because actually your the preventative primary care setting will keep those costs down, which actually helps with the overall business costs as well. So it's worth bearing that in mind.
I do think, though, that there's been a lot of great programs, and I'm sure we've all seen them around the menopause, but a lot of them do start with a point of entry, which is blood tests, and I do agree with Matt. I think one of the things insurers can do is better signposting and better awareness and education, so that women don't think that they have to start with a blood test, because I agree, absolutely, you don't. Yeah.
We've covered quite a lot of topics that can raise debate across the floor. I will hog the mic if you don't stop me. Any questions from the floor, please? Please. There's a mic.
Oh. Hi. Firstly, I think it's great, Axe, what you've done around making this standard, and it would be really interesting, and I'm specifically asking this to Bupa because we have Bupa Care, of when your plans are to do this, because if you buy it as an add-on, we'll know, everyone, especially in HR, you're squeezed by budget. Is it going to happen? And the whole thing, when you're going through the menopause, if we're going to have to educate our employees to say, don't mention the menopause because you won't get cover for something that way, it's making this, it's not helping women. So when, I guess Bupa or other insurers, when are you going to make it not a taboo subject to be able to bring up, so that you don't say, oh, that we don't cover that under our standard policy?
So from a policy point of view, we are continually looking at how we can optimise and how we can make those improvements. And as mentioned, we do, if you were to ask somebody, have they had support through their menopause on the insurance side of their Bupa product, if that is related to mental health conditions or other diagnostics, we've always covered diagnostics, as you mentioned, Matt, so that would be standard as part of the policy. What you wouldn't be covered for on your insurance is the GP appointment as part of the insurance policy. Now, that is something that we naturally feed in, and events like this are fantastic for us to be able to feed back further thought leadership on areas that we need to focus more in, to see if that's something that we can include within. How it stands at the moment is we very much do have primary care and the insurance separately, but it doesn't mean that we can't change that moving forwards. Again, factors that you have to consider is if we, adding those extra services in, we need to make sure we can provide that joined up service between primary and secondary care so that it's a seamless patient journey throughout. So the answer is we don't do standard primary care as part of insurance at the moment. It doesn't mean that we won't do that moving forwards, and that's something that will continually feed into product development.
I think it's really important, just you heard, I think, from Carolyn and also from our colleague who's a psychiatrist, that psychiatrists, if you went with mental health, aren't going to pinpoint you to the right thing. So I do think there is probably a real need for people like, companies like Bupa to make that so much easier. Otherwise, people will be going to the wrong place for the wrong things.
Can I just say, Vitality have had it included in all their health plans for over 2 years now as standard as well.
Hi there. It's really great that from an insurance perspective there are so many kind of policies now around the menopause. I'm just wondering to what extent you are proactively communicating that to organisations and people who are responsible for those relationships, because I wonder whether there's a bit of a gap, and I'm not sure, it's just a question as to the services that are available, but actually females within the organisation knowing they are available. So given that menopause is such a prevalent topic now, to what extent are you actually proactively communicating those services to make sure that people are taking you up on those services available?
Shall I go this one? Yeah, thank you. Great question, because it's fine having all these services in place, but if you don't know about them, it's not going to, you're not going to get the uptake. So I think we've done a lot of work about how, at Aviva, how we communicate these to best effect. But often when we're speaking to corporates, especially in a large corporate setting, they'll say, we want to run a campaign, and what can you do to support this so they can make a really big splash, as you were saying, around all of their services. So how can we create a really joined up picture? And we would absolutely bring our expertise to that to say, and this is how you can articulate these particular benefits, but let's do that in the round. And it might be that you're slicing and dicing it in different ways. So that might be women's health as a topic. Don't forget menopause service as part of that. Or it might be mental health. Well, mental health, menopause shows up in mental health, cardiovascular health, musculoskeletal health. So whichever sort of campaign you're running or whichever you're focusing around, let's draw out those menopause themes as part of that and then play out those communications so that it always forms part of a bigger, broader story and consolidates your overall view of your offering, because then you get to play in all those other elements as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The making sure you talk about it as much as possible is something we've said, like let's break down the stigma. And I think one of the challenges is we're not the ultimate solution. Like you can say, put in a benefit or we'll make it standard. But if you don't tell employees about it, you don't broadcast it, you don't make it safe for people to come forward, have the right policy. And if you can't create a policy right now, have a handbook, have somewhere for managers to refer to so that they can access it, they can broadcast it. Give that line manager training. As a line manager, there's so much training we have to take on board now to support so many different people with so many different things, but make it accessible, make it regular, talk about it at every opportunity, and it will happen a lot more organically. I mean, it's a really quick anecdote, and it isn't about menopause, but we had a corporate come to us and say, we want to put in a gender dysphoria benefit because we've been told we should. Okay, well, how are you going to settle this in? How are you going to make sure people can access it? How's it going to be safe? Well, I don't think they will. I'm not sure we've got any of them, was the response from an HR professional in a corporate. And you can see it makes me really angry. That's what we're up against, is we've got to work together collaboratively. We will help you all day long design benefits to the point of corporates being the leader in developing these bespoke benefits. We will find a way to support your employees. If it's American parentage saying we do something in the US, we want to do it in the UK, we'll find a way to fit it into the NHS system so that it can work appropriately in the UK. But you have to work with us in broadcasting it, having the right policies, making it safe for people to enter those benefits.
think it's also so important to include men in the conversation. In our industry, it's very male heavy, and a lot of men will be in management, senior positions. So it's all well and good having the policy, but if a woman doesn't feel comfortable going to a manager, then they won't, and then they won't access what's available.
I think there's tips for that in some of the support provision that's available. But I think integrating the menopause services into everything that everybody logs into to look at their private medical insurance and their health and well-being. So for us, it's a key visual part of the provision of all of our services, front and centre. World Menopause Day, as we know, is tomorrow. It's a critical point for all insurers. I'm sure we're all promoting all of our services out. So at least once a year it is. But I think it needs to be integrated in the main provision of the main private medical insurance.
Last question, if we may. I'm sorry, time is marching on, please.
It's a super quick question and reflection. As a psychiatrist with a special interest in menopause, my clinic was so full I had to shut it. You could have triplicated me. I was literally, there were women out the door. And also I was doing stuff that wasn't medically privileged. I was giving advice which is often common sense, and it could have been given by a nurse prescriber. Is there a case for changing the paradigm and saying we should just provide menopause education as standard with a holistic approach at the age of 40 to every person in the UK that covers all the bases, that says it's a time to reappraise?
Having been through it myself, absolutely, yes. I completely agree.
Why start at 40, ultimately? So I know
School
that,
age.
yeah, as a result, I know there are some schools in the curriculum now through their personal health and social education that talk about menopause, because ultimately your mum might be going through it, your nan, whatever. So yeah, we do need to talk about it, and that's the breaking down the stigma in the workplace, breaking down the stigma elsewhere, absolutely.
But also for women my age, I know that I will go through that, and I don't want it to be a shock. And every colleague, every person that I speak to that has gone through it, they've all said they didn't expect what was going to happen. The information is out there, so we just need to communicate it better.
It feels like we're all going to tell our daughters and sons about it.
I think just one final point on that I think is really helpful. It's something that within Bupa has worked brilliantly, is having those community groups, so a safe space where people can talk openly, chat with others and talk about things that have helped, but actually just have that safe space of a community, whether it's a Teams chat, something nice and relaxed, which is a community of people who are all experiencing the same thing, and provide them support through that. And we found that work really useful.
Thank you. The insurance industry sounds as though it has made a lot of progress. Thank you for joining us, to the panellists.